They named the scholarship after the man who ruined my life. Every time I walked through those university gates and saw his face carved into that stone wall, cold, polished, eternal, I felt something twist in my chest, not anger at first, not even hatred, just a kind of deep, sharp ache that never stopped aching. People walked past that statue with admiration in their eyes. They touched it for luck, took pictures in front of it like he was a hero, a man worth remembering. But all I saw was a monument to betrayal. They praised the name Anthony Cross like it was sacred, like it had built something noble, something lasting. But I knew the truth buried beneath the marble. I knew the story they never printed in the alumni magazines, the part where he left my mother in the dark the moment she became inconvenient, pregnant, alone, and disposable. She carried me while working 2 jobs, slept on a friend's couch, and cried behind closed doors because she loved a man who erased her like a stain on his image. They didn't see what that kind of abandonment does to a woman, but I did. I watched her smile grow quieter, her eyes tired faster, her body breaking under debt he could have cleared with a single signature, and he knew. He knew about me, he just chose silence over responsibility, reputation over blood. And when she died, she didn't go out with peace. She died drowning in bills, in shame, in the unbearable weight of being forgotten by the man who had the world but left her with nothing, not even a name for me to claim. I buried her in a borrowed suit, in a cheap cemetery with weeds taller than the headstones, while somewhere across the city, Anthony Cross was giving a keynote speech on ethics and innovation. And the day I heard his voice on a promotional video playing at the university gates, something inside me cracked so violently I could barely breathe. I knew then, standing in that crowd of smiling students, clapping faculty and polished donors, that one day, somehow, I would make the world see him the way I did. Not as a visionary, but as a coward, not as a founder, but as a man who built his empire on silence, secrets, and the woman he destroyed to protect himself. And I swore I wouldn't stop. Not until that smile carved in stone was remembered for what it really was. A lie. My name is Aaron, and I didn't come here to study. I came to destroy a legacy wrapped in gold and rot, a legacy the world clapped for, bowed to, named buildings after. But underneath all the applause was a truth no one knew, not the professors who quoted him, not the students who worshipped him, and definitely not the alumni who still toasted to his name. Anthony Cross, the man they called a genius, a pioneer, a self-made icon, was the same man who left my mother broken, voiceless, and alone before his rise ever began. He used her when he had nothing, made promises that tasted like forever, and then discarded her like a secret that couldn't fit into the image he was building. She was the cost of his reputation. Me, the reminder he wanted erased. I was born from silence, raised in struggle, fed stories of a father who never came back, who never called, and never sent a cent. My mother never said his name, but I heard it enough in whispered phone calls and the tears she thought I couldn't hear behind locked doors, and when she died, quietly, surrounded by unpaid bills and unfinished dreams, I was left with nothing but her grief and his name etched into my chest like a wound I couldn't stop touching. And then, I got in. Crossridge University, the institution built on his money, where every corner, every hallway, every scholarship carried his fingerprints. They welcomed me with open arms, called me promising, brilliant, driven, if only they knew. I walked through those gates like a ghost in plain sight, using my mother's last name, changing just enough of my past to stay invisible, while every part of me screamed to shatter the walls they worshipped him in. I didn't come to sit in classrooms. I came to plant landmines in the very system he created. I came to make sure the empire he left behind crumbled under the weight of what he buried. But in the middle of it all, I found her. Nora. Sharp-witted, clear-eyed, with a kind of softness that crept past all my walls before I could stop it. She wasn't like the others. She didn't ask easy questions. She didn't settle for surface. She saw the quiet anger in me and didn't run from it. She challenged it, soothed it, made me believe, for the first time, that maybe I could be more than what he left behind. I told her stories that were half-truths, gave her the version of me that didn't include bloodlines and betrayal, because I didn't want her to look at me and see a war. I wanted her to see something human. But secrets rot in silence. And fate. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. Because the girl I trusted, the girl who made me feel seen, who held my hand in the dark without flinching, wasn't just Nora. She was Nora Cross, his niece. And the night I found out, it felt like the ground beneath me snapped open, like everything I thought I was building suddenly cracked in half. Was she a coincidence? Or part of the plan? Did she know who I was? Had she known all along? I looked at her smile differently after that. Heard her voice like it was layered in lies, and every kiss we shared replayed in my mind like a trap I'd willingly walked into. And in that moment, one truth hit harder than anything else. Maybe I wasn't the only one hiding something. She was kind in a way that didn't scream for attention. Quiet, observant, the kind that made you feel like you were safe even when the world was on fire. Sharp too, sharper than I gave her credit for at first, and beautiful. Not in the way that turns heads, but in the way that lingers long after she's walked away. And somehow, she saw me. Not the version I let most people see, the composed, focused, guarded shell I wore like armor, but the chaos underneath, the bitterness I kept buried beneath polite nods and late-night silences. She saw it and didn't flinch, didn't ask me to explain it, didn't try to fix it. She just stayed, close enough to calm the storm but far enough not to drown in it. She made me forget why I came here. For a while. I let her in more than I meant to, let her rest her head on my shoulder in the library, let her laugh at the dark parts of me I'd never let anyone near, and when she kissed me, it felt like something dangerous. Because I knew, deep down, that people like me don't get to keep things like her. But fate doesn't care about timing. The deeper I dug into Anthony Cross's past, the darker it got. At first it was small things. Dates that didn't add up, inconsistencies in contracts, missing names. But then I found the forged documents, the stolen research patents that were never his to claim, the grant funds funneled into shell accounts that disappeared without a trace. He didn't build an empire, he stole one. And he didn't do it alone. There was someone helping him keep the machine running long after his death, someone powerful enough to erase mistakes, to bury evidence before it surfaced, someone who still walked the university halls with his head held high. Chancellor Everett Thorne, Anthony's most trusted friend, and now the chairman of the board of trustees. I found emails buried in deleted folders, encrypted threads between Cross and Thorne dating back years. Plans, bribes, cover-ups, even a blackmail scheme that led to a student's mysterious expulsion. A student whose only crime was publishing a thesis too close to the truth. Thorne was cleaning up everything I uncovered. Every file I downloaded, he wiped from the server hours later. Every connection I traced, he severed before I could go public. And worst of all, every name that came too close disappeared quietly. But as I pieced the puzzle together, a new question crept in, slow and cold. How were they still one step ahead of me? How did they know what I was searching, when I was searching it, and what I planned to expose? It didn't make sense. Unless someone close to me was feeding them everything. I was tracing missing scholarship funds, combing through dead servers and forgotten university archives when I stumbled on a folder labeled Closed Projects, 1996. No context, no description, just years of dust and digital silence. Inside it, a single audio file, untitled, no metadata, just a timestamp. I nearly skipped it. But something, instinct, fate, maybe her voice still buried somewhere in me, made me press play. First, only static. Then her voice cracked through. My mother. I hadn't heard her voice in years. Not like this. Not raw. Not broken. And certainly not begging. Please, please don't do this, she sobbed, barely breathing between the words. You said you loved me. You said this wouldn't ruin me. I can't go back like this. They'll know. She was unraveling right there in my ears. The same woman who raised me with iron and silence, now pleading with someone who didn't even flinch. Then came his voice. Anthony Cross. Smooth. Cold. Empty of everything but calculation. You were never supposed to matter this much. No one will believe you anyway. I couldn't move. I sat frozen, fingers trembling, staring at the wall while their voices played out the last scene of a life she never let me see. He destroyed her with that voice. Not with violence. Not with scandal. But with erasure. He buried her dignity under his legacy, left her holding his secret and the child that didn't fit his perfect narrative, me. I played the recording again. And again. And again. For 3 nights, I didn't sleep. I sat alone in the dark, headphones on, listening to the woman who gave me everything, beg for mercy from the man who took everything from her. And when the tears finally stopped, when the ache in my chest hardened into something sharper, that's when the plan began. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about truth. I would expose the fraud, the stolen research, the fake scholarships, the rigged admissions. I would bring down the cross-scholarship fund and every polished lie it was built on. I would make the world choke on the name they once worshipped. Because he didn't deserve to be remembered for his brilliance. He deserved to be remembered for the lives he ruined. And the one he tried to erase. Mine. This is where everything began to fall apart, not with a scream or a warning, but with a name, her name. Nora, the girl I trusted with the pieces of me no one else had touched. The girl who leaned into my silence like it didn't scare her. Who whispered that she loved me like it was a promise carved into her bones, turned out to be part of the very legacy I was trying to destroy. She was his niece, Anthony Cross's blood, raised within the same walls I planned to burn down. And the truth is, she knew who I was from the moment she heard my last name. She knew and stayed anyway, looked me in the eyes and smiled, traced her fingers over my chest and said she felt safe with me, all while feeding my silence back to them like a loyal little spy trained to blend in. The betrayal didn't just sting, it swallowed me whole, not because she lied. Lies I could have handled, expected even, but because I believed she wouldn't, because I let her in too far, too deep, too much. I told her things no one else knew, about my mother, about the coldness I carried like a second skin, about the nights I couldn't sleep because his name echoed louder in my head than my own heartbeat. And she held me through it, kissed my scars like they were sacred, promised she was with me. But every second she was peeling me open just to hand the pieces back to the same people who built the lie that ruined my life. When I confronted her, I thought she'd break. I thought I'd see regret or guilt or even panic in her eyes. But she didn't cry, didn't deny it, didn't even pretend to be sorry. She just stood there, arms folded like she'd already accepted the damage, and said in a voice too calm for the chaos she'd caused, "I was trying to protect you from yourself." And for a moment I didn't know whether to laugh or fall apart, because how do you protect someone by betraying them? How do you love someone and still choose the side that destroyed them? But it didn't matter, because by then it was already too late. The trust was gone, the warmth was gone, whatever softness she had given me had hardened into stone. The second I realized she was just another piece of the machine I came here to break. And the worst part wasn't that she fooled me, it was that I let her. I let her hold the one part of me that still believed someone could love me without a motive, without a warning. Without a bloodline tying them to the man who ruined everything I ever had. And now that part of me is gone, buried beneath her smile, her silence, and the truth she never told until it didn't matter anymore. Because the boy who once believed in her is dead. And what's left of me doesn't trust softness anymore. Only fire. I leaked everything. The audio file that had haunted me night after night, my mother's voice begging through static and silence, the forged documents, the tampered grants, the scholarship ledgers rewritten with blood and bribes. I didn't send them all at once. I released them like slow poison, one piece at a time. Timed leaks dropped into the hands of journalists too hungry to ask permission. I made sure the truth bled into the world without a filter, without spin. Just raw and undeniable. The reaction was chaos. The press swarmed the university within hours. Headlines screamed betrayal, legacy fraud, institutional rot. They tore into the Cross Foundation like vultures. Board members scrambled to protect their names, but it was too late. Resignations came in waves. Statements were released and retracted and rewritten again. Students marched. Donors pulled out. Professors issued apologies they never meant. Buildings were stripped of his name. Scholarships frozen. Statues taken down in the dead of night. To avoid cameras, but I made sure the cameras were there anyway. He was no longer a symbol of greatness. He was a warning. And I had finally made them see it. But there was no ceremony for me, no applause, no recognition. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I packed up everything I owned into one torn bag, left my dorm without saying goodbye, and walked away with a cleared name and a heart that no longer knew what it meant to trust. I didn't take a degree. I didn't wait to be congratulated for surviving what they tried to bury, because I wasn't looking for praise. I was looking for silence, for space. For whatever kind of peace you get when the mission ends but the scars stay. And still, sometimes, when the world slows down and my mind starts wandering without permission, I think of her. Nora. I wonder if any of it was real, if the way she held me meant anything, if the tears she never cried came after I left, or if I was just a task she executed with precision, and guilt tucked neatly behind her eyes. I wonder if she ever wanted to tell me the truth, but was too afraid of what it would do to me, or too loyal to the man who made both of our lives something we had to escape from in different ways. But wondering doesn't change anything. Because the damage is already done, the war already ended, and the part of me that needed love more than justice died the moment I realized it came with strings. Sometimes revenge doesn't heal you. Just freeze you. And freedom, for a man like me, for a name like mine, is the only kind of peace I'll ever get to keep. And that's enough. It has to be. I thought it ended the day they tore his statue down, thought watching the face that had haunted my childhood be lowered from its pedestal would feel like justice, like closure, like something inside me could finally breathe again. I thought I'd walk away with my chest lighter, my hands clean, and my mother's memory no longer hidden beneath his carefully polished lies. But peace doesn't come just because you earn it. It comes if it wants to, and sometimes, it doesn't come at all. Not when the war you started still burns in places you can't see, not when you realize the fire you set might have scorched more than you intended. Because even when the truth is out and the world knows the name Anthony Cross was a lie, there are still shadows that won't leave you, still nights when you wake up and wonder what it cost you to win. It was 2 months later when she appeared again, like a ghost walking through the last place I thought she'd dare to come back to. The old library near my apartment hadn't changed, it still smelled like forgotten paper and dust. The windows still let in too much light during the day and none at all when the sun dipped low. It was where I went when I needed silence that didn't ask questions, and somehow, she remembered that. Nora stood between the history shelves like she belonged to a memory I hadn't dealt with yet, wearing that soft gray sweater I used to pull her into when she was cold, the one she always wore when she was anxious but trying not to show it. Her arms were crossed, her shoulders tense, but her eyes never left me, not even for a second. She didn't say a word. And I didn't either. Because how do you speak when the air between you is thick with everything that was never said? How do you look at the person who held your heart and handed it to the people you were trying to destroy? I wanted to walk past her like she didn't matter anymore, like her silence hadn't once felt like safety, but something inside me cracked when I looked at her, and I hated how familiar that feeling was, like the ache you forgot you were carrying until someone touched it again. My chest tightened the way it used to when I was trying not to want her, and in that second, I realized part of me still did. Not because I trusted her, not because I forgave her, but because love doesn't just disappear when the truth shows up. It lingers, bruised and broken and still breathing, waiting for answers that may never come. I didn't ask why she was there. But I could tell from the way her fingers trembled and the way her lips parted like she was still choosing between lies and honesty, that she hadn't come to fix what was broken. She had come to break something else. And even though I didn't know what yet, I could feel it in my gut. This wasn't over. Whatever she came to say wasn't going to heal anything. It was going to hurt. And maybe this time, it would hurt worse than before. She didn't sit, just stood across from me like she wasn't sure she had the right to be there. Her fingers shook as she pulled something from her coat pocket. A letter, folded twice over, worn at the edges like she'd been carrying it for days, maybe weeks, maybe longer. She placed it on the table between us like it burned her skin to hold it any longer. Her eyes were red, but dry, like she had run out of tears long before this moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was so low I almost didn't catch it. "You need to read this, Aaron, please." That was it. No excuses, no explanations, no rehearsed defense or apologies painted in soft words, just a whisper carried by guilt and something else I couldn't name yet. She didn't wait for me to respond, didn't ask me to forgive her, didn't even look back as she turned and walked out the door, leaving nothing but that letter and the storm it would soon unleash. I sat there for what felt like forever, staring at the paper, like opening it would undo the last 2 months, like maybe it would give me a reason to hate her a little less or hate myself a little more for still wanting the truth from her. When I finally unfolded it, the words hit harder than I was prepared for. Because what I read knocked the air out of me. She wasn't lying to protect her uncle, she wasn't just another pawn trying to preserve the Cross family name. The silence, the distance, the carefully placed betrayal, it wasn't about them. It was about me. She had been lying to protect me. From something bigger than I ever imagined, something darker than legacy or corruption or reputation, something rooted deeper than Cross's crimes, something older and uglier than a single man's empire. A name I didn't recognize repeated in the pages, financial transfers tied to a shadow corporation, surveillance files with timestamps that matched my movements before I ever arrived at the university, an internal memo that referred to me not just as a threat, but as a target. And at the bottom of the last page, her handwriting, trembling and rushed. They were never trying to protect Anthony. They were watching you from the beginning. I tried to stop it, but I was too late. Don't trust anyone, not even the ones who stood beside you. Suddenly, everything I thought I'd unraveled felt incomplete. The scandal I exposed, the names I thought I brought down, the fire I thought I started, it was all just the surface. There was something beneath it all. And now that I had touched it, I knew. I wasn't done. I was in deeper than I had ever planned to go. And someone, somewhere, was waiting for me to make the next move. Apparently, Anthony Cross wasn't just the man who ruined my mother's life. He was the center of a hidden operation so carefully built that even federal agents hadn't cracked it until too late. He was under investigation for laundering funds through the same scholarship program that made him a hero, using the identities of real students, including mine, as shells in a larger system. My admission, my records, my financial aid, all of it had been manipulated to move money, cleaned through academic channels, disguised as support, while I lived each day thinking I'd earned my place. I had been a cover story, a tool in a system I didn't even know existed, and he never expected anyone to look close enough to find the truth, especially not his son. The documents in Nora's envelope weren't guesses or theories, they were confirmation. Copies of internal memos, encrypted transaction logs, flagged communication trails, all of it pointing to one undeniable fact. I wasn't just a bystander in Cross's legacy, I was part of the machinery, and had I not dug as far as I did, I might have gone my whole life being used by the very man who erased my mother to protect his image. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was criminal, it was calculated, and it was far bigger than I thought. And Nora, she was never just the girl I fell for in the quiet moments between chaos. She was placed close to me, at first by design, chosen to monitor, to report, to keep tabs on the son no one was supposed to know about. But something happened. She saw more than she was supposed to. She read between the lines, connected dots her family never wanted her to, and when she realized who I was and what they were doing with my name, she broke the rules that kept her safe. She didn't tell me, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know how to tell me the truth without destroying me. She watched me tear through every lie, expose every fraud, name every monster, and by the time she realized how far I was willing to go, how close I was to becoming someone they could lock away forever, she did the one thing she thought would protect me. She became the villain. She let me believe she was loyal to them, let me hate her, walk away from her, erase her from the parts of me that still loved her, all because she thought if I walked away angry, I wouldn't look back long enough to get caught in the fallout. But her silence came with a cost. While I was building my revenge, she was burning bridges behind me, blocking the people who were closing in, covering my tracks before I even knew I'd left them. She was never trying to save Cross. She was trying to save me. And now that I knew, I didn't know what to feel. Grief. Rage. Guilt. Maybe all three. Because the girl I pushed away was the only reason I wasn't sitting behind bars or buried under the weight of a system built to crush people like me, before they ever had a chance to fight back. I thought I understood what betrayal looked like. But I had no idea what sacrifice felt like until now. The documents I leaked weren't just damning. They were dangerous, not only because they exposed Anthony Cross for what he was, but because they tore open the carefully stitched veil hiding a much larger machine, a network of hidden donors, silent partners, and powerful people who had built their fortunes on secrecy, people who never planned to be seen, people who had everything to lose. I had dragged their sins into the light, and they were watching me now. I could feel it in the way shadows moved where they shouldn't, in the way the people who helped me started backing away, whispering that they were getting strange calls, unmarked letters, quiet threats that carried no fingerprints. I thought tearing Anthony down would end the story, thought that once the truth was out, I'd walk away free, but I was wrong. It was just the beginning. That night I went back to my apartment and something felt off before I even turned the key. The air was still, too still, like the whole building was holding its breath. I pushed the door open and saw the lock had been forced, just enough to leave no mess, no noise. Nothing was taken. Nothing was broken. Except one thing. A single photo I kept of my mother, tucked in a frame on my desk, untouched for years. It had been moved. Tilted slightly. Not knocked over, not obvious, just off. Enough for me to notice. Enough for me to know someone had been inside. Someone wanted me to feel them close, to know this wasn't over, that secrets, once dragged into the light, don't just vanish. They fight back, and they don't fight fair. That was the moment I understood something I hadn't let myself believe before. I wasn't just a whistleblower or a vengeful son with a plan. I had become a liability, a threat to people who had learned how to bury mistakes with money and time, and now I was the mistake they hadn't accounted for. I didn't just carry my father's name anymore. I carried a target. Maybe I did burn the name that haunted me. Maybe I succeeded in turning Anthony Cross from legend to cautionary tale. But what rose in the ashes wasn't peace. It was silence. Heavy. Watching. And somewhere inside it, something darker was waiting. Something that had survived long before I came along and would do anything to survive long after I'm gone. And the worst part is, this time, I don't know if I'm ready. I didn't sleep that night. The photo being moved, it felt small, but heavy, like someone whispering without speaking, like a warning meant only for me. I stared at it for hours, fingers brushing the edge of the frame, tracing the outline of my mother's face, the warmth in her smile frozen in time. I remembered the softness in her voice, the quiet strength she carried through every storm, how she worked 2 jobs, came home exhausted, yet still tucked me in every night like I was the only thing keeping her going. She never once spoke his name, never mentioned Anthony Cross, not in anger, not in sorrow. It was like she had erased him completely, not because she forgot, but because remembering cost too much. But now, something didn't add up. The files I found, the trails I uncovered, they all pointed to Anthony's hand in the scholarship program. Records he had access to, names he selected, students used to move money through fake grants and manipulated accounts. My name was one of them. But Anthony Cross was dead by the time I applied. He had already been gone, buried, praised in the news, mourned by those who never knew the truth. So how could he have signed off on my admission? How could he have authorized a file that hadn't even existed yet? The pieces didn't fit, and the deeper I thought about it, the colder the room felt. Either someone was forging his name long after he died, or the man I thought I'd buried was never really gone. The thought made my stomach twist, a chilling mix of disbelief and dread, because if someone else was pulling strings under his name, they were still out there, still active, still watching. And if he was alive, if he had faked his own death to escape the noose tightening around his empire, then everything I'd done meant nothing. I hadn't ended the nightmare. I had only stirred it awake. The picture sat in my hands like a question I couldn't answer, my mother's eyes staring back at me through time, and suddenly, I wondered if she had known all along. If the silence she wore so carefully wasn't just about pain, but protection. Maybe she hadn't erased his name to forget him. Maybe she had erased it to keep me safe from something bigger than I ever understood. And now, by digging up the past, I had cracked something open that was never meant to be touched. The answer came from a place I had spent years trying to forget. Our old apartment, the one with the cracked walls, peeling ceilings, and the broken lock we could never afford to fix. We were evicted from there when I was 16, dragged out by people who never asked why the rent was suddenly impossible to pay, who never saw my mother crying in the hallway with my hand in hers, promising we'd find something better. I hadn't been back since. But something in me said to go, like the walls still held a story I wasn't ready to hear until now. I broke in through the back where the rusted frame gave way with a hard push, and the air inside smelled of dust, mold, and memories I never wanted to breathe again. The place was empty. Silent. Dead. The floorboards creaked with every step, the kitchen cabinet doors hung crooked, and the wallpaper was stripped like the room had been peeling itself away over time. I didn't expect to find anything. Not really. But when I walked into the closet of the bedroom we once shared, something shifted beneath my foot. A loose board, warped but not broken. I pried it up, hands shaking, unsure of what I was even hoping to find. What I uncovered was a small, rusted tin box wrapped in a faded scarf, the one my mother used to wear on the coldest mornings, the one she clutched the day we left. Inside the box were 2 letters. One was torn, creased from being opened and refolded too many times. The other was sealed, yellowed with age but never touched. I opened the torn one first. The handwriting was sharp, familiar, too neat to be anyone but him, Anthony Cross. It was addressed to my mother, and the date in the corner was a punch to the chest. 2 years before I was born. That meant she had been in contact with him long after I thought she cut ties, long after I assumed he abandoned us completely. The words in the letter made my skin crawl. He was pleading with her, begging her not to go public with what she knew, promising her security, protection, even a job within one of his companies if she agreed to stay quiet. He wrote as if they had been partners once, as if whatever happened between them had been more than abandonment. But the line that made me go still, the one that pulled the ground from under me, was the last sentence. You were part of it too, Olivia. Don't pretend you weren't. I read that line over and over until the words blurred. My mother, the woman who raised me alone, who refused to speak his name, who carried pain like a second skin, had been involved. Not just hurt by him. Not just betrayed. Involved. And if what he said was true, then the past wasn't just his mess. It was theirs. And by extension, mine. I sat there on the closet floor, the open letter trembling in my hand, as the silence thickened around me. Suddenly, everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was cracked wide open. She wasn't just a victim of his world. She had been inside it. And whatever she knew, whatever she did, she had buried it deep enough that not even I had found it until now. And the sealed letter still waited. Unopened. Untouched. Addressed to me. The second letter was different. The paper was rough, stained at the edges, and the handwriting was messy, rushed, almost panicked. It wasn't from Anthony. It was signed by someone else, a name I didn't recognize. Marcus Hale. The ink had smudged in places, like it had been folded too quickly or handled with shaking hands. I unfolded it slowly, heart pounding harder with every line I read. The words weren't kind. They weren't careful. They were blunt, scared, angry. He told her the deal was falling apart, that the foundation was collapsing under scrutiny, and that the Cross Foundation is just a front. His words bled urgency, desperation. If we go down, we all go down. Then came the sentence that turned my blood cold. I warned you not to sleep with him. You thought you were smarter than the system. I stared at the letter, unable to breathe. It felt like the floor beneath me had cracked open. I had spent my entire life believing my mother was the one who was left behind, the one who had been broken, discarded, silenced. But this told a different story. A more complicated one. She hadn't just been used by Anthony. She had been part of something built on secrets and greed, and somewhere along the line, she made a choice that cost her everything. I dropped the letter. My hand was numb. My body was still. I sat there on the cold floor of the place we once called home, surrounded by dust and truth, and the kind of silence that doesn't offer comfort. My mind raced back to every unanswered question, every time she avoided the past, every time I asked about my father and saw her eyes harden just enough to know I'd stepped somewhere dangerous. My mother wasn't just a victim. She was involved. She was in the room where it happened. She was part of the system I thought I was fighting against. Maybe not at the top. Maybe not the mastermind. But she was close enough to be warned, close enough to be blamed. And now I couldn't tell what part of her life was love and what part was survival. I couldn't tell if she hid the truth to protect me or because she couldn't face what she had done. And the worst part was, she took it all to the grave. She was part of the early laundering system, probably when it was still small, when no one was watching, when it felt more like survival than crime. She must have been young then, scared, broke, maybe thinking she could outsmart the men around her, maybe believing she could walk away when it got too deep. But Anthony, he didn't ruin her life alone. They were partners. In something illegal. Maybe even something dangerous. And when the stakes got higher, when the risk outweighed her usefulness, he cut her out and disappeared, leaving her behind to carry the blame without protection, without resources, and without a voice. The silence she carried wasn't just pain. It was guilt. She didn't just grieve what he took from her. She buried what they did together. She raised me in the shadows of her own choices, wrapped the truth in bedtime stories and half-truths, kept my questions about him brief and unanswered, not because she couldn't bear to speak his name, but because she knew speaking it would open a door that could never be closed. Every scar she hid, every night she sat staring out the window in silence, every shift in her eyes when I asked about the past, it all makes sense now. She wasn't just trying to protect me. She was terrified of what I'd find if I ever looked too close. And now, it's caught up with us. Everything I thought I knew, about her, about him, about myself, just cracked wide open. My identity, my revenge, my rage. It was all built on half the story. I didn't uncover a tragedy. I unlocked a trap. I didn't avenge a victim. I exposed a war. A war between power and desperation. Between the people who started the fire and the ones who burned trying to escape it. And now that the truth is out, now that the names are in the open and the blood is on the table, I'm standing in the middle of a storm that didn't start with me, but might just end with me. Because secrets like these don't die quietly. And no one walks away clean. I didn't go home for 2 days. I couldn't. Every instinct in me screamed to stay moving, to never let the same ceiling watch me sleep twice. I rotated between cheap motels on the edge of the city, kept my phone on airplane mode except when I needed directions, slept in spurts with one eye open, always facing the door. I thought I was prepared for what I started. I thought I had accounted for every consequence, every ghost that might claw its way from the past. But nothing prepared me for the moment Marcus Hale became more than a name on a forgotten letter. He was real. Breathing. Alive. For days, I believed he was just another relic from my mother's old life, someone who vanished when the system collapsed, someone who disappeared quietly into the shadows once Anthony was gone. But I was wrong. He hadn't disappeared. He had been waiting. And at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. The screen glowed with words that pulled the breath from my chest. You don't know what you've walked into. We need to talk. MH. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it, to throw the phone across the room, to pretend it didn't make my skin crawl or my heart race. But before I could decide, another message came through. A photo. It was me. Taken just 2 days ago at the old apartment, standing at the closet, crouched beside the loose floorboard, the tin box open in my hands. The angle was clear, close, deliberate. Whoever took it hadn't tried to hide. They wanted me to see it. They wanted me to know I wasn't alone that day. That someone had been watching, silently, waiting, recording every second like it was just the beginning of something far worse. My blood ran cold. They knew where I was. They knew what I found. And if Marcus Hale sent that picture, it meant 2 things. He was close, and he wanted something. But if someone else sent it on his behalf, it meant something even worse. He wasn't the only one watching. And whatever I thought I was in control of, I wasn't anymore. I agreed to meet him. No police. No backup. Just me and the man who apparently knew more about my mother than I did. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't even take my car. I used a rideshare, paid in cash, and walked the last few blocks in silence, every footstep echoing louder than it should have. Part of me knew this could be a trap, but the rest of me needed answers more than I needed safety. We met at an old parking garage on the south end of the city, the kind that looked abandoned on purpose. Faded concrete, broken lights, rust bleeding down the pillars like time had given up trying to hold the place together. Marcus Hale stood in the far corner, alone, leaning against a pillar with a slow drag of a cigarette in his hand. He looked older than I expected, worn down by whatever history he'd been carrying. His eyes were tired, sunken in a way that said he hadn't slept right in years. He had a limp, favoring his right leg, and a presence that didn't feel like a threat, but still felt dangerous. He didn't waste time pretending to be kind. Your mother wasn't supposed to keep anything, he said, exhaling smoke that curled like secrets in the cold air. She promised she'd destroy it if we let her walk. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just looked at him and asked the question that had been eating at me since I opened that box. What was she involved in? What did she do that made even a man like Anthony Cross afraid? What truth was too dangerous for her to tell her own son? Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked at me like he was deciding whether I was ready for what came next. Then he flicked the cigarette to the ground, crushed it under his boot, and said, "It wasn't just money laundering. It was intelligence. Classified data funneled through university grants. Cross made a deal with people you've never heard of, and your mother, Olivia, she wasn't just helping. She was the one who figured out how to hide it." My heart dropped. Everything shifted in that moment. My mother wasn't just part of a scam. She was the architect behind the system they used to move sensitive information under the radar. She didn't just help the machine run. She helped build it. And when she wanted out, when she saw what it was becoming, they gave her a choice: disappear or be erased. And now I understood why she kept me close but always guarded. Why she never let me ask too many questions. Why she died with more secrets than memories. She had buried everything to protect me, hoping the past would stay buried. But I had dug it up. And now the people who once feared her were starting to fear me too. He said it started small, like most sins do. First with fake scholarships, invented on paper for students who didn't exist. Then fake names, created for donors who wanted to hide money without leaving a trace. It spiraled from there. Stolen identities, rerouted bank accounts, backdoor donations from people with too much power and too many secrets. Anthony Cross was the face, the name everyone praised, the shield they used to make it all look legitimate. But Marcus was the engine. He moved the money, forged the files, buried the mistakes. He was the ghost behind the curtain, and nobody ever asked questions because the system worked. Then my mother joined. She wasn't just a part of it. She was better than them. She found flaws in their code, holes in the laundering process that could have blown everything wide open. Instead of exploiting them, she fixed them. Quietly. Efficiently. But the more she cleaned up, the more dangerous she became. She knew too much. She saw too clearly. She wasn't just another accomplice. They feared her. She wanted out, he said, his voice low and bitter. But Anthony didn't trust her. Said she knew too much, had too much proof. So he framed her. Set her up to take the fall. And we all watched her burn. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, fists clenched, trying to breathe through the storm tearing through my chest. She wasn't just betrayed. She was sacrificed. And the people who had built an empire on her brilliance didn't hesitate to destroy her when she became a threat. I asked him why he was telling me this now. Why, after all these years, he was choosing to speak, to finally pull the curtain back. And what he said chilled my blood. Because they're not done, Aaron. You think you ended something, but all you did was wake it up. There's a list, and your name's on it. Just like hers was. Because you're not the only one digging. And the others don't want the past uncovered, they want it buried, with you in it. That's when I realized everything had changed. This wasn't about justice anymore. It was survival. The fire I had started was now consuming everything, and the people caught in the smoke weren't just from the past. They were powerful, present, and watching. I had evidence, names, transaction logs, classified files tucked inside folders no one was supposed to ever find. I had enough to bring down the entire foundation, every corrupt partner, every hidden investor who thought they were untouchable. It was all there. And it was all mine. But releasing it would come with a cost. If I made it public, if I exposed the system and set the truth free, I wouldn't make it through the week. They would come for me the way they came for her. Swift, brutal, final. But if I stayed silent, if I let fear win, if I tucked the truth back into the shadows, then I'd be no better than them. I'd become exactly what I spent my whole life trying to destroy. And that's what broke me. Not the fear of death, but the fear of becoming the kind of man my mother once ran from. The kind of man who knows what's right and does nothing. Marcus gave me a drive, small and unmarked, the kind that didn't look like much until you realized it could burn the world down. He said it was everything he had left, the last trace of the network, the full map of how it all worked, the passwords, the names, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the politicians, the buried connections between power and silence. Proof that this was bigger than Anthony Cross, bigger than my mother, bigger than all of us. But before he handed it over, he looked at me, really looked, and there was something in his eyes that made the room feel colder. If you open that door, he said quietly, you can't close it. Not ever. I didn't respond. I just took the drive and left, heart pounding, hands shaking, the weight of 1,000 possibilities crawling over my skin. Now I'm sitting in a dark motel room that smells like bleach and regret, the only light coming from the laptop screen in front of me. The files are waiting. The truth is breathing under my fingertips. And I can feel the weight of 2 lives pressing down on my chest. My mother's and mine. She kept her secrets to protect me. I chased the truth to honor her. But what I found wasn't justice. It was a labyrinth of betrayal, built on blood and lies, and somewhere in the middle of it all, I lost the clear line between right and survival. I came here seeking answers. I thought I wanted revenge. I thought I wanted to expose them, destroy everything they built, make the world see what they did. But now I'm faced with something harder than any of that. Do I want justice? Or do I want to live? Because opening these files doesn't just risk my life. It ensures I never get it back. Not a normal one. Not a peaceful one. Not even a quiet one. They will come for me, erase me, bury me like they buried everyone else who got too close. But they think I gave up. And that might be the one thing that saves me. They think the pressure broke me. That I ran, panicked, lost my grip and vanished into the wind like every other name whispered in cautionary tales. Ambition gone too far, another bright mind swallowed by obsession. And that's exactly what I wanted them to believe. The night Marcus gave me the drive, I stopped being just a son looking for answers. I became something else. I made a choice. Not justice, not survival, but both. I knew releasing those files would paint a target on my back, and not just a metaphorical one. It would mean sleepless nights, hunted silence, watching the door even when it was locked. But what if I could die without dying? What if I could disappear without abandoning the mission? So I staged it. I deleted every account tied to my name, scrubbed my digital footprint clean, wiped encrypted backups that held pieces of who I used to be. I emptied my bank account in one transfer, bounced it through 7 countries, each step leaving less of me behind until it landed in a ghost wallet no one could trace. Then I drove to Maple Bridge just before dawn, left my phone on the railing with the screen cracked and smudged, a bloodied hoodie folded beside it, and one final note written in my mother's exact handwriting. I'm sorry. The media devoured it. Photos of the bridge lit up headlines by noon. Reports called it tragic, haunting, inevitable. They described me as brilliant, unstable, troubled, obsessed with the past. The university released a polished statement expressing grief. The foundation released nothing at all. That silence told me everything I needed to know. They believed I was gone. They were lowering their guard. And that meant I could finally begin. Scholarship whistleblower missing, presumed dead. Anonymous hacker may have committed suicide. Sources say pressure was too much. They mourned me for a few days. A couple candlelight vigils, some edited clips of my interviews, old photos plastered across news feeds with dramatic captions. Then they moved on. The world always does. But the people behind the corruption, the ones who should have never known peace, they relaxed. They let out the breath they'd been holding for years. They thought the storm had passed. That the fire had finally gone out. That the problem had solved itself. And that's when I got to work. Marcus gave me everything I needed to vanish. A new name. New papers. Even a new look. Not surgical, not dramatic, just enough to slide through crowds without turning heads. A little weight lost, hair grown out, posture shifted, a different way of speaking, of holding myself. The kind of change that doesn't scream transformation but makes you disappear in all the right places. From there, I embedded myself like a virus they didn't know was still in the system. Quietly, patiently, I found a way back in. Hacked into internal communications. Dug through old security tunnels Anthony once used and repurposed them. They were still active. Still hidden. Through them, I saw everything. The messages, the orders, the cover-ups still happening behind closed doors. I read conversations from people who thought I was dead, mocking me, erasing the last traces of my existence, congratulating themselves for surviving the fallout. They had no idea the bullet was still coming. Because I'm not just targeting the foundation anymore. I'm going after everyone who fed it. The elite donors who used education as a shield. The banks that laundered their donations like blood money. The universities that took the funds and ignored the questions. Even the politicians whose names were hidden behind layers of encryption and folders marked only with symbols, thinking they were safe because they never said it out loud. I've created a new identity online. A ghost. A whisper. Just a signature at the bottom of every leak, every breach, every exposed transaction that sends shivers down their clean boardroom walls. I don't want fame. I don't want credit. I don't even want to be remembered. I want the truth to become poison in their system. Slow. Silent. Irreversible. And when it's all done, when every corrupt name has been dragged from the shadows and their empires turned to dust, when their lies are choking them louder than their silence ever did, then maybe, just maybe, I'll let the world know I'm still alive. But not now. For now, I remain exactly where they think I am. Gone. Because the best way to finish what I started isn't by standing in the light. It's by becoming the ghost they can't chase. It took 11 months in the dark. 11 months of vanishing into corners of the internet no one dares to touch, sending faceless messages, orchestrating anonymous leaks, coordinating takedowns like chess moves while the world slept. I became a shadow that moved through firewalls, whispered through servers, and shattered reputations with midnight uploads that made headlines before morning coffee. The Cross Foundation crumbled under the weight of truth, boardrooms emptied themselves in fear, and 3 major universities were swallowed by federal investigations. 2 high-profile political careers disintegrated in a matter of hours, their faces stripped from campaign posters and replaced with silence. All of it happened without anyone knowing I was still breathing. But there was one name left. The one that had stayed buried beneath everything. The name I hadn't dared to say out loud. Because it wasn't written in any file. It wasn't mentioned in any email. And yet, every thread I pulled led back to it. And this time, if I was going to survive what came next, I wouldn't be able to stay a ghost. The final target. Leon Trask, Anthony Cross's silent partner, the man who gave the system its roots, who moved the money through invisible corridors, whose fingerprints never appeared on anything because he was the one teaching everyone how to wipe theirs. He was the architect behind the curtain, the one who ghosted every wire transfer, every bribe, every fake scholarship through channels so polished they passed audits without blinking. He wasn't mentioned in any file, wasn't listed in any donor logs, wasn't even whispered about in the backdoor messages. Because he never used his own name. Until now. Marcus had one last key, buried in a forgotten vault registered under a fake import company in Zurich. He hadn't wanted to give it up, said it was too dangerous, too final. But when he saw how far I was willing to go, how much I had already lost, he handed it over like a man surrendering a loaded gun. When I opened the drive, I expected another list, another cover-up, another dead end dressed in legal codes. What I found was worse. Trask's real identity. His original signature on the very first account ever used to funnel scholarship funds. His hand on the switch before anyone even realized there was a machine. But what tore through me like glass was the name of the shell company that account belonged to. Olivia Standard. My mother's name. It felt like the room shifted, like the air collapsed inside my lungs. Everything I had believed, every reason I carried my rage like a weapon, cracked at its center. That wasn't just an alias. That was personal. That was deliberate. That was a message. It broke something in me. Because this wasn't just about power or money or reputation anymore. This was about her. And whatever Trask's connection to her truly was, it didn't end with betrayal. It started with it. All this time I believed she was manipulated, discarded, a casualty of a man's hunger for power. I thought she was the broken-hearted girl who tried to love a monster and paid the price. But the truth was colder, sharper. She helped build him. Maybe she regretted it. Maybe she tried to run when she saw what it was turning into, but she wasn't just a victim. She was a builder. A silent architect of the very system I had spent my life trying to tear down. And that changed everything. Because Trask didn't just destroy my family, he was part of it. Somewhere between their shared ambition and their secrets, they were something more than accomplices. Maybe partners. Maybe lovers. Maybe enemies who knew each other too well to walk away clean. Whatever they were, it was buried so deep even death hadn't been able to kill it. And I was the ghost left behind, carrying a name built on lies and blood. But grief doesn't erase purpose. And pain doesn't cancel truth. The final leak was ready. Every file decrypted. Every name verified. I had financial records that traced every stolen cent back to its source. Personal messages between Trask and board members, whispers about buying silence, intimidating families, even faking deaths to protect the foundation. Photos of off-record meetings with officials, some in hotel rooms, some in parking garages, all with faces that once sat in government halls and corporate offices. It wasn't just corruption. It was rot. And I had enough to burn Trask's empire to ash. To make sure the name Leon Trask would never again be spoken without fear. But the closer I got to releasing it, the more one question clawed at the edge of my mind. If I destroy him, do I also destroy what's left of her? And is that a price I'm finally willing to pay? But then I saw the email. It was buried in a hidden thread, tucked between lines of junk code designed to make it look like corrupted data. A message from Trask to my mother, dated just weeks before I was born. The subject line was blank, but the body hit harder than anything I'd read before. If anything happens to me, Olivia, they'll come for you next. But if we stay quiet, we both get to raise him right. No legacy. No lies. Just peace. He wasn't just protecting himself. He was trying to protect her. And maybe that's why she stayed silent her whole life. Maybe that's why she let the world misunderstand her. Why she let the shame stain her name. Why she looked me in the eye year after year and carried the unbearable weight without ever setting it down. She wasn't just hiding guilt. She was hiding me. Guarding the only part of her life she thought was still pure. Because sometimes protecting the future means burying the past so deep it starts to rot. And you let it, because digging it up would only drag the people you love into the same darkness you're already drowning in. She didn't lie to me out of fear. She lied out of love. And now, I was holding the truth that broke her. The question was, what was I supposed to do with it? Now I'm staring at the final leak, every file lined up, every detail ready to ignite. My finger hovers over the send button, one breath away from collapsing everything these people built. One click and it all burns. I have two choices. Burn it all down. Or walk away and let the last secret die with me. Justice, or peace. I close the laptop without sending. Not because Trask deserves mercy, and not because my mother was innocent, but because I've come to understand something more dangerous than revenge. Something harder to live with, but far more powerful. Power doesn't come from exposure. It comes from restraint. The ability to hold the truth in your hands and choose silence over destruction, not out of weakness, but because you finally understand that not every war deserves to be fought to the end. And the truth doesn't always need to be shouted to matter. Sometimes it just needs to live inside you, quietly, like a scar you never show, but never forget. A reminder. A lesson. A piece of fire you carry without letting it consume you. I step outside, let the cold air bite against my skin, and for the first time in years, I don't feel rage or grief, or fire clawing its way through my chest. I feel free. Not because I won, but because I chose not to lose myself. I live in a town where no one knows my name. Not my real one, anyway. They call me Jack now, Jack Moore, a name so ordinary it slips through systems unnoticed, a name that doesn't carry weight or memory or blood. And that's exactly how I need it. I rent a small house near a lake, the kind of place with creaky floors and bad plumbing, where the wind whistles through the gaps in the windows and the silence feels earned. The neighbors are kind in that distant, small-town way. They wave from across the street but never step closer, never ask where I came from, and I never offer. I work at a second-hand bookstore run by a retired couple who still believe stories can save people. They care more about first editions and dust jackets than politics or scandals. They don't own a television, and they still write receipts by hand. They remind me what peace looks like when it isn't pretending to be something else. Some mornings I walk down to the pier with a chipped mug of black coffee, sit at the edge and watch the lake stretch toward the horizon, still and wide, like it knows how to carry secrets without ever drowning in them. I watch the water move without urgency and wonder what my mother would have said if she knew how it all ended. I don't think she would have cared about the names I exposed or the systems I cracked. I think she would have just looked at me and said, "You didn't let it turn you cruel." And somehow that would have been enough. Because survival doesn't always mean running. Sometimes it means choosing to stop, to breathe, to live in the spaces where no one expects you to burn. The hard part isn't staying hidden. It's staying still. There are days I still catch myself scanning license plates, memorizing faces that linger too long, reaching for a burner phone I stopped carrying months ago. Instinct doesn't go away just because the danger does. But I breathe through it, remind myself I'm not running anymore. Not hiding. Not fighting. Just living. I made peace with the ghosts. The world moved on like it always does. Headlines faded. The Cross Foundation became a footnote in corporate history. The donors disappeared behind new scandals, louder headlines, shinier distractions. People moved on to fresh chaos, because in this world, history only matters until the next trending tragedy. Good. Let it fade. Let the rot stay buried, where it can't infect anyone else. I didn't destroy the last piece of truth. I buried it. Locked it behind layers of encryption, hidden beneath 5 firewalls and one key that only I know. Maybe someday I'll pass it on. Maybe someone younger, angrier, more willing to bleed for answers will find it when the world needs to remember again. But not now. Not today. Today I choose silence. I choose secondhand books, creaking floorboards, slow mornings, the smell of old paper, and the sound of nothing. I choose to sip coffee without watching shadows, to smile at strangers who don't know my sins. I choose a life so quiet it no longer echoes. Because sometimes peace doesn't find you. Sometimes you have to carve it out with your bare hands, fight through fire and betrayal, tear down everything you thought justice was, just to protect the smallest part of yourself that's still soft. Still human. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories.